just because during swimming his 3-year-old son had accidentally kicked his mother's first love. My wife, who was a national swimming champion, immediately pushed the child underwater and kept saying over and over that she was only making him practice breath holding. Everyone present panicked and wanted to jump into the water at once to save my son, but she stopped them all. I watched as my son remained underwater and his struggling gradually weakened. I fell to my knees on the ground and begged her again and again. Our son had only just started learning to swim. He didn't know how to hold his breath. He would die. He hadn't kicked Shu Yuran on purpose. I would make him apologize. If necessary, I would even make him bow his head and apologize in front of Shu Yuran. Please pull our son out. If you hadn't spoiled him so much, he wouldn't have kicked others while swimming. I am a swimming champion. Don't I know how to teach children to swim? People say that a father who dotes on his child too much becomes his greatest enemy, and that father is you. Half an hour later, my son finally floated up to the surface of the water. I pushed through the crowd and ran to lift him into my arms. But right before my eyes was his pale, swollen face. My son had already died from drowning. I left everything and rushed him to the hospital like a madman, while my wife stood there at that very moment with her first love, choosing a swimsuit for the next competition. When my father-in-law came running to the emergency room, I could no longer control myself. Yuan is gone. The time of our 5-year agreement is also about to end. I beg you, let me leave. I don't want anything anymore. Deep regret was clearly visible on my father-in-law's face. With trembling hands, he helped me up and forced a smile, trying to comfort me. Yuan inherited his mother Wu Wei's swimming talent. Nothing will happen to him. Don't worry too much. He will recover soon. But before he could even finish speaking, the light in the emergency room went out. The doctor came out and looked at us with a regretful expression, shaking his head. We are sorry. The child was brought to the hospital too late. His breathing had stopped for too long. His heart had already stopped beating before he even reached the hospital. We tried our best. Besides that, during the treatment we discovered something else. His condition was not like a normal drowning. There was a large amount of water in his stomach, and there were also marks of a rope tied around his ankles. Did the child really just slip and fall into the water? In that moment, the image of Yuan thrashing restlessly underwater kept flashing through my mind. I had thought he simply wasn't coming up because he was completing the task his mother had given him. But how could I have known that Qin Wu Wei had tied her own son's feet to stop him from coming up? How helpless and broken my son must have been at that time. My father-in-law trembled with rage and shouted loudly, "That animal! She is an animal. She didn't even spare her own blood." The moment he finished speaking, a delivery boy arrived carrying a fruitcake. That bitch killed her own son. She didn't even have the courage to come herself. She just sent a cake. She must still be romancing that bastard right now. That greedy man also dreams of becoming the son-in-law of my Qin family. Absolutely not. I'll call her right now. I'll drag her here and make her kneel in front of Yuan. But he made more than 10 calls in a row. Qin Wu Wei didn't answer a single one. Instead, my phone rang. I answered with trembling hands. On the other end came Qin Wu Wei's irritable and indifferent voice. "Lu Chun, you ran to complain to my father over such a small matter. You think if you put on a drama using Yuan's name I'll give in? Stop the drama. I only made him practice holding his breath for a little while. Was there any need to rush to the hospital over something so minor? Your son himself used to say he would become the champion in my place. So let him practice. My name is Qin Wu Wei. Don't embarrass me. Stop this cheap act. I'm busy preparing for the next competition. Don't disturb me." I looked at the cake that had fallen on the ground. It had mango filling inside, and Yuan had been allergic to mango since childhood. The funniest part was that Qin Wu Wei thought this was his favorite flavor. When the nurse brought Yuan's body out, my father-in-law, who had been shouting so loudly just a moment ago, fell completely silent in an instant. His voice choked. With trembling hands, he lifted the white sheet covering Yuan's face. He staggered and almost fell to the ground. "It's all my fault. I didn't raise my daughter properly. But Lu Chun, yes, the 5-year agreement is about to end. But before Yuan returned, the relationship between you two was very good. Can you give her one more chance? Promise. I will force her to cut all ties with Yuan forever." 5 years ago my father-in-law had come to me like this, drowning in tears. At that time, I had just graduated from college. He had begged me to help Qin Wuwei. Back then, her old injury had flared up again. After my parents passed away, the Qin family had supported my studies and living expenses for 5 years. To repay their kindness, I agreed and married into the Qin family as a live-in son-in-law. Every day, I took care of Qin Wuwei without any complaint. I always encouraged her and finally succeeded in bringing her back to the swimming track. I had thought that after Yuan Yuan was born, the 5-year agreement would already be over. But I never imagined the ending would be so painful. And now my father-in-law wanted me to stay in the Qin family again. I didn't think for even a second. Gently touching Yuan Yuan's already cold cheek, I slowly said, "Now Qin Wuwei can return to competitions again. According to our agreement, all the favors between us are now settled. And in any case, Yuan Yuan should never have come into this world. It was only my own selfishness that insisted on bringing him into this world. Now that he is gone, I should leave too." I sat by Yuan Yuan's side in the hospital the entire night. When all the formalities were completed and I watched with my own eyes as the funeral home staff took his body away, I returned to the Qin family's house. I had only come to gather a few of my son's memories. But as soon as I stepped inside, my eyes froze on the clothes scattered across the living room. Following the sound of the voices, I reached the indoor swimming pool. There I saw Qin Wuwei wearing a revealing swimsuit, comfortably lying in Zhu Xinian's arms. Lovingly stroking her own stomach, she said, "You are mommy's only baby. Just wait a little longer. Very soon I will make you a part of the Qin family with full dignity." Zhu Xinian smiled. "Besides our child, what about Yuan Yuan then? Today he deliberately kicked me. If he finds out you're pregnant, who knows how much of a scene he'll create? Or maybe we should just get rid of this child." Qin Wuwei gently placed a finger on his lips. But the words that came out of her mouth were even more vicious. "No. Yuan Yuan has been spoiled so much by his father that nothing can be done about him now. I never liked him anyway. If it had been possible, I would never have given birth to a son like Yuan Yuan." Hearing such hatred-filled words about Yuan Yuan from her mouth, I clenched my fists so tightly that my nails dug into my palms. Blood slowly began to seep out. Just then both of them noticed me. But Qin Wuwei showed not the slightest shame. Instead, she took Zhu Xinian's hand and walked right up to me. Looking at me with eyes full of hatred, she said, "So you finally decided to show your face. Where did you go hide and sleep last night? Don't think I don't know. You must have gone crying to my father again. You forced him so much that he even started refusing to recognize his own grandson and threatened to die just to stop Zhu Xinian from coming into this house. If that's the case, then pack your things. Take Yuan Yuan and go back to the old house. Stay there and keep being my father's good son-in-law. In this house I have only one husband, and that is Zhu Xinian. Where is Yuan Yuan? Tell him to come out right now and kneel in front of Zhu Xinian to apologize. Don't think he can escape by pretending to be sick." Looking at her arrogant face, the scene of Yuan Yuan helplessly struggling underwater kept flashing before my eyes again and again. At that moment my heart wanted to push her into this very pool and drown her. Just as I was about to step toward her, I suddenly remembered Yuan Yuan's innocent voice from beside the pool yesterday. "Papa, Mommy is the best swimming champion in the world. I also want to become a champion like her. And Papa, don't be sad. Mommy promised me that when I become the champion, she will grant me one wish. Then I'll tell her to stay home every day and play with Papa." I bit my lips hard and tried to suppress the pain rising in my heart. I quietly turned and started to leave. But Qin Wuwei forcefully grabbed my hand and pulled me back. "What's with this attitude? The mistake is yours, and you won't even apologize? What right do you have to be angry with me? Anyway, if you and my father hadn't forced Zhu Xinian at that time, you would never have become the son-in-law of the Qin family. An orphan who had nothing. Even you were dreaming of changing your fate by marrying me. What happened? Now you've set your eyes on some other rich girl? Wanting to win her sympathy by telling your pitiful story again? Having a father like you was already a shame for Yuan Yuan." I still remained silent. Seeing my silence, Qin Wuwei became even more furious. She tightly grabbed my hand and pushed me straight into the swimming pool. I only taught the child a little discipline. You're taking it so badly. Then today I'll train you as well. Don't put on this gentleman act in front of me. You made a fool of my father. Only I know your real worth. A man who only knows how to live off women, who only sees money. If you hadn't stolen Juzinian's credit at that time and lied that the great doctor was only willing to treat me because of you, I would have died. But I would never have married you. I made Juzinian wait for 5 years. And now I will never allow any injustice to him and our child. Yuan inherited your worthless blood. He was never worthy of being my heir. I kept sinking deeper into the water. I no longer even had the strength to listen to Qin Wuwei's words. I was simply drowning slowly. At that moment, the terrifying flood from my childhood flashed before my eyes again. I saw my parents, who, without caring for their own lives, were holding me up with both hands. I slowly let out my breath and then stopped moving my arms and legs as well. Yuan, don't be afraid, son. Papa is coming to you now. In the end, Qin Wuwei jumped into the water and dragged me out. Anger was still on her face, but a faint fear was also clearly visible in her eyes. Lu Chun, stop acting. Quickly come to your senses. She slapped my cheeks hard again and again. I slowly regained consciousness. The moment my eyes fell on her, I could no longer control myself. I directly slapped her hard across the face. Lu Chun, have you gone mad? You raised your hand against me? Treating your own wife like this. I gave a cold laugh and, looking at her, said, You forgot that I don't even know how to swim. You were screaming that Yuan should apologize to Juzinian. Fine. Now tell that bastard to go down to hell and apologize to my son. For a moment Qin Wuwei's face completely froze. But in the next instant her eyes filled with hatred and disgust again. She jerked her hand away from me. I fell hard onto the ground. She stood up, brushing off her clothes, as if even touching me was something dirty for her. Then, looking at me with arrogant eyes, she said, Lu Chun, you turned out to be even more despicable than I thought. You got your own son killed. Were you afraid that after Juzinian's child is born I would ignore Yuan and it would affect your benefits? That's why you hid him with my father. But I will never let this scheme succeed. Saying this, she rubbed her hands on her clothes several times, as if touching me had dirted them. If you hadn't existed, my and Juzinian's child would have been 5 years old today. Lu Chun, you stole his right and his place. Now I am only putting everything back in its rightful place. Even after doing all this, I have shown you a lot of mercy. With that, she took Juzinian's hand and walked away with arrogance. I could only stare blankly at her back. My heart ached so much that even breathing became difficult. That year, when Qin Wuwei's old injury flared up again, not only could she no longer participate in competitions, but because of breaking the contract she also had to pay a huge compensation. My father-in-law ran everywhere. Then he found out that only one retired divine doctor could treat her. But no matter how much they begged, that doctor flatly refused to treat her. When they saw that Qin Wuwei stayed locked in her room every day and her mental condition was getting worse day by day, then they found out that my grandfather had once helped that divine doctor, and by coincidence my father-in-law had also paid for all of my education. To repay their kindness, I went to that divine doctor as Qin Wuwei's husband. Citing the old favor, I begged him to treat her. But even after doing that, I still had to kneel outside his house for 3 days and 3 nights without eating or drinking. Only then did his heart soften. When Qin Wuwei regained consciousness, she was completely fine again, just like before. After that, we had a very grand wedding. I took care of her every need like an ideal husband. And 2 years later, when after great difficulty we finally got Yuan, I started taking even more care of her. I protected her so carefully, as if holding an egg in my hands, as if shielding a flower from falling. Because after my parents passed away, she was the only person who had given me true love and a sense of belonging. I completely drowned in that love. I regarded her as the light of my life. But ever since Juzinian returned, Qin Wuwei's behavior toward me began to change day by day. Things reached the point where even when Yuan wanted to cling to her affectionately, She started looking at him with hatred and irritation. For some reason she had firmly convinced herself that the one who had gone to the divine doctor and saved her life at that time was Ju Xinian. And because of that, Ju Xinian had been forced to leave immediately and break up with her. While in her eyes I had become a despicable man who had flattered his father-in-law, stolen Ju Xinian's credit, and taken his place. No matter how many times my father-in-law showed her that 5-year agreement, she never believed it. Instead, she started treating me even more cruelly. The moment Qin Wuwei left, a strong smell of burning smoke spread throughout the backyard. Covering my nose and mouth, I ran outside coughing and saw Ju Xinian ordering the servants. Pick up every single one of Yuan's things and throw them all into the fire. Hurry up. What are you standing there staring at? Wuwei herself gave the order. From today onward, only my word will rule in this house. If you want to keep your jobs, move your hands quickly. My eyes turned red with anger. I ran like a madman to save my son's belongings. But Ju Xinian's men grabbed me tightly. Stand there quietly. I shouted in rage. How dare you burn Yuan's things? But Ju Xinian didn't listen to me at all. He himself picked up the last toy and deliberately threw it into the fire. It was the same toy that Qin Wuwei had casually bought and given on Yuan's birthday. But my son had been so happy to receive it that he slept hugging it every night. I watched helplessly as that toy slowly burned to ashes in the fire. In the end, I even stopped resisting. Suddenly, I began to laugh loudly. Burn it. Very good. After saying that, I no longer had the strength to stand. I collapsed unconscious right there on the ground. When my eyes opened again, I found myself lying on a bed. I looked at the phone with dull eyes. I could hardly believe that time had already passed and it was the next day. Today was the day the 5-year agreement was supposed to end. And today was also Yuan's funeral. I struggled to sit up. I washed my face with cold water. Then I carefully shaved my overgrown beard. I didn't want my son to still worry about me even while leaving. But the moment I finished getting ready, the door of the room was kicked open hard. When Qin Wuwei saw that I was conscious and presentable, she paused for a moment. But in the next instant she went crazy with anger. She directly slapped me hard across the face. Lu Chen, you even have the mood to shave? It seems you really were the one who poured oil on the stairs, which is why Xinian fell and broke his leg. Saying this, she dragged me and stood me outside Ju Xinian's room. Ju Xinian was lying on the bed groaning in pain. The moment he saw me, tears began to flow from his eyes. The private doctor standing beside him immediately said, Miss Qin, Mr. Ju's leg has just suffered a very deep injury. If another accident happens, this leg may never heal, and whether he will ever be able to dance again will all depend on fate. The moment the doctor finished speaking, Xinian dragged himself from the bed in front of me and began bowing again and again, apologizing. Brother Lu, I know you don't like me, but how can you be so heartless? You pushed me and broke my leg. Hearing this, Qin Wuwei kicked me hard in anger. Then, supporting Xinian, she screamed, Lu Chen, I foolishly thought you might fall ill from the cold while lying outside, so I had you carried into the room. But how was I to know you would turn out to be so vicious? Just because I wanted to bring you and Yuan back to the main house, you broke Xinian's leg. Are you planning to kill me directly next time? This time I will not forgive you at all. She signaled to the servants. They immediately brought the divorce papers and placed them in front of her. Without thinking, she signed her name and threw the papers straight at my face. From today, I will also remove Yuan's name from the Qin family register. The right to become the Qin family's main heir will belong only to my and Xinian's child. I stared at her in shock. Then I shouted loudly, Qin Wuwei, Yuan is truly dead. Half of the blood in his body was yours too. If you remove his name from the family register, even after death his soul will never find peace. He will keep wandering forever. I had never believed in ghosts or spirits, but when it came to Yuan, I didn't want my son to be unable to rest in peace even after death. For a moment hesitation appeared on Qin Wuwei's face, but Ju Xinian's words immediately wiped that moment away. Brother Lu, how can you say such a thing? Yuan was only practicing breath holding in the swimming pool. She is a professional swimmer. How could she kill her own son? You keep using Yuan as an excuse again and again because you want to harm me. You have already broken one of my legs. Do you want to break the other one too? Wu Wei, it's all my fault. Brother Lu, please don't divorce her. I don't want to keep living in fear afterward either. I'll leave right now. Saying this, he shook off Qin Wuwei's hand and stubbornly limped toward the door. Drops of blood from his leg were dripping onto the ground. Qin Wuwei's face instantly turned cold. Gritting her teeth, she said, Lu Chun, you're still lying. I've been training like this since childhood. Look, I'm still perfectly fine today. How can your son be so weak? Does anyone die just from holding their breath for a short while? Do you think I'm a fool? Just now I saw you calmly shaving. If Yuan had truly died, how could a father sit there so peacefully? I will never give you another chance to harm Xinian. She ordered the servants. A board full of nails and a whip were brought. Everything was placed outside Zhu Xinian's room. Qin Wuwei forcibly made me kneel on that nail-studded board. Listen carefully, all of you. Keep an eye on him. If he moves even a little, beat him with the whip. Saying this, Qin Wuwei herself picked up the whip and struck my back with full force. Blood immediately began flowing from my back. For a moment she panicked and the whip slipped from her hand in reflex. She was just about to step toward me when suddenly Zhu Xinian clutched his head and pretended to collapse to the ground. Wu Wei, my head is spinning. Could there be bleeding in my brain too? Am I going to die? Qin Wu Wei immediately panicked. She ran to him, glaring at me with anger. She said, Remember today's lesson. No matter what happens tomorrow, bring Yuan to the hospital and make him apologize to Xinian. And don't put on any more acts. Saying this, she supported Xinian and left with arrogance. I don't know how much time passed. When I failed to reach Yuan's funeral, Qin Wuwei's father came looking for me in a panic. Seeing me covered in blood, he immediately wanted to take me to the hospital. But I refused. I stuck to only one thing. I would personally escort my son to his final destination. I would watch with my own eyes as the urn of his ashes was buried under the earth. At that time, my entire body was aching down to the bones. But there was a strange peace in my heart. Yuan, in the next life, don't make me your father. Lu Chen, from today you are free. By evening, Qin Wuwei was still lovingly feeding Xinian chicken soup spoon by spoon. Just then her father suddenly flung open the hospital room door and stormed in. In anger, he snatched the soup bowl from her hand and threw it straight onto the floor. Dad, did Lu Chan go to you again to complain about me? He's still insisting that Yuan won't apologize to Xinian. Just giving him a divorce and letting him go was already a huge favor to him. Shut up. Saying only that, her father struck Qin Wuwei hard with his cane. His entire body was trembling with rage. You wretched girl. You killed Yuan and still want him to apologize to this bastard even after death? Today was his funeral. You didn't even show up. Do you even know what people outside are saying about the Qin family? Qin Wuwei froze completely for a moment. Then, as if something suddenly came back to her, she gave a cold laugh. Dad, if Lu Chun is lying using his own son as an excuse, fine. But you're his maternal grandfather. Will you also join him in putting on such a despicable act? Zhu Xinian immediately spoke up as well. Uncle, I know you've never liked me, but joking about a child isn't right either. Seeing both of them so stubborn, their father's anger increased even more. He clutched his chest tightly. Then he threw Yuan's death certificate straight at Qin Wuwei's face. I can't understand how a stupid child like you was born in our Qin family. Open your eyes and look for yourself. Qin Wuwei picked up the death certificate with trembling hands. Her face turned pale in an instant. Yuan really died? How is this possible? I only told him to hold his breath a little longer. If he was in pain, why didn't he come up by himself? How could he die? She kept repeating only this. A cunning light immediately flashed in Zhu Xinian's eyes. He quickly came to her side and hugged her, saying, Wu Wei, you only did it unintentionally. Maybe this was written in Yuan's fate. That's why an accident happened during practice. Don't torment yourself so much. But the moment she heard these words, a slight frown appeared on Qin Wui's face, and her father's expression became even harder. He walked straight up to Zhu Zinian and slapped him hard across the face. You cursed my grandson. You are the ill omen of this house. First you ruined my daughter's life, and now through her you've also taken my grandson's life. With every word he slapped Zhu Zinian's cheeks harder and harder. Even though he was an old man, Zhu Zinian, whose leg had only just been broken, could not face him at all. He could only look at Qin Wuwei with tears streaming down, begging for help. Wuwei, please make uncle understand. I didn't do anything. My leg is broken too. Are you going to watch uncle beat me to death? Zhu Zinian's crying voice finally brought Qin Wuwei back to her senses. She quickly stood in front of him and said to her father, Dad, Zinian is not at fault here. Yuan died because of my own carelessness. If anyone is to be blamed, blame me. Her father looked at her with cold eyes. You're still taking this man's side. For the first time, his own daughter felt completely like a stranger to him. Exhausted, he sat down on the nearby chair. Then he signaled to his assistant. The assistant immediately brought a man inside. Qin Wuwei looked at him. Confusion was in her eyes. But in the next moment, the man fell hard onto his knees. Please don't call the police. I didn't want to do any of this either. Hearing this, Qin Wuwei kicked him hard. Her face turned red with anger. Yuan's death was because of you, he said in panic. No, not mine, He pointed straight at Zhu Zinian. This man told me to tie the child's feet. He said you wanted to teach the child a lesson. I really didn't know you people were going to kill that child. The moment he finished speaking, Zhu Zinian's face turned completely white. The most shocked one was Qin Wuwei herself. Her eyes turned blood red. She slowly turned and stared straight at Zhu Zinian. You tied Yuan's feet? Zinian hadn't even been able to say anything when Qin Wuwei lunged at him. She grabbed his shirt and dragged him off the bed onto the floor. I only kicked him once, and you took my son's life. How did you become so heartless? Give me my Yuan back. She screamed and began choking him with both hands. There was not even a trace of love left between them now. Zhu Zinian struggled, trying to pry her hands away with both of his. Wuwei, don't listen to his words. We've grown up together since childhood. Don't you know what kind of person I am? And if I hadn't been there at that time, how would you have been able to swim again? Have you forgotten everything? Hearing his words, Qin Wuwei's grip slowly loosened. Zhu Zinian seized the chance and freed himself. Gasping heavily, he collapsed onto the ground. But Qin Wuwei's father seemed to have already anticipated this lie. He took a thick file from the assistant's hands and threw all the photos and documents inside it straight in front of both of them. Stop the nonsense. In those 100 photos, the hero was always Zhu Zinian, and the heroine was a foreign girl. Look carefully at the dates of those photos. At the time he was going abroad to get married, your injury still hadn't healed. Think for yourself, when he was already married. Did he have enough time to go beg some divine doctor for your sake? That year, the moment you got injured, he disappeared without leaving a single trace. I only hid the truth from you because I was afraid you wouldn't be able to bear the shock. But how was I to know that after hearing a couple of his sweet words you would believe every single one of his lies? When that foreign woman's business collapsed, the shameless man came crawling back to stick to you. He broke his own leg and deliberately pinned the blame on Lu Chen. The huge incident that happened to you was also planned by him. He orchestrated everything. You foolish girl. With every single word, Father Qin mercilessly struck Qin Wuwei with his cane. By the end his face had turned completely white with anger and despair. Qin Wuwei collapsed onto the ground and slowly began to speak. So the one who saved me was really Lu Chen, not Zhu Zinian. What have I done? When she thought about how much Lu Chen had done for her, her heart filled with regret. She began slapping her own cheeks hard again and again. Suddenly her hand stopped. Turning toward the Qin family members, she said while crying, a murderer must be punished. I will definitely make him pay the price for Yuan's death. After that she immediately ordered an abortion surgery to be arranged. No matter how much Zhu Zinian screamed and shouted, she left without looking back. After the abortion, when Qin Wuwei returned home, the servants were redecorating Yuan's room. Everything in the room felt foreign to her. Where did all of Yuan's things go? Madam, we burned everything, Mr. Zhu Zinian said. How can the future young master use an old dead child's belongings? What if he also becomes stubborn and spoiled like him later? Anyway, that child was raised by that man. Just looking at them made one feel disgusted. The servants thought they were flattering her. But they had no idea when Qin Wui's face had already turned as cold as ice. So everyone in this house looked at Yuan Yuan with such hatred. The child? And Lu Chen too. The coldness in her heart grew even deeper. She began smashing everything in the room like a madwoman. She didn't stop until everything was completely destroyed. Then, gritting her teeth, she said, "All of you are fired. There is no place in the Qin family for people who forget kindness and don't know how to respect their masters." After dismissing everyone, she turned the entire house upside down. But apart from the divorce papers I had left behind, not a single belonging of mine or Yuan Yuan's remained in the house. She was completely broken. She went straight to Yuan Yuan's grave. For 3 days she sat there without eating or drinking anything. She felt that if she did this, perhaps I would forgive her and come back. But how was she to know? I had already left everything behind and was living under the open sky. When I was about to leave this place forever, the divine doctor sent his people to find me. The moment I saw my old benefactor, thousands of questions rose in my heart. I had already known that one day this would happen. After listening to him, I was even more shocked. It turned out he was not only a great doctor but also an expert in physiognomy. The very first time he saw Qin Wuwei, he understood that she could never become the destination of my life. That was why he had refused to treat her at that time. But I had knelt in the heavy rain for 3 days and 3 nights, begging him to save her life. In the end, he had no choice but to break his own rule. From that day onward, he had quietly kept watch over my life. He had thought that perhaps old age had deceived his eyes. But not even half a year had passed before everything fell apart. Hearing all this, my eyes filled with tears. Son, let go of what has passed. A person should always look forward. From that day on, I began living with the divine doctor. I started learning medicine from him. Even without a blood relation, our bond became deeper than that of a real grandfather and grandson. Lu Chen, that woman has shown up outside again. I don't understand how anyone can be so shameless. Master saved her life once, but she never valued it. Now that she's in trouble, she comes raising her head again. All she knows is how to put on emotional dramas. Come on. Let's go outside and properly scold her away today. My senior sister Wang, the divine doctor's true disciple, grabbed my hand while muttering angrily and pulled me outside. In all these years, apart from that one time when I had fallen to my knees and begged him, the divine doctor had always strictly followed his rules. After that, he never treated anyone else again. Listen, aren't you ashamed? How can you be so shameless? Don't you know my master's rules? No matter how many days you kneel here, he will never treat you. Go back to wherever you came from. The woman kneeling in front of me looked very thin, frail, and miserable. She kept her head lowered and silently listened to Senior Sister Wang's scolding. Seeing her reminded me of those days when I had wandered from place to place for Qin Wui's treatment. My heart softened a little. Just as Senior Sister Wang was about to scold her again, I held her hand and said softly, "Senior Sister, let it be. She is also a pitiful person. If she wants to kneel here, let her." How was I to know that the moment she heard my words, that woman would suddenly raise her head? The instant I saw her face, I froze for a moment. Lu Chen, so you really are here. I had never imagined that I would meet Qin Wuwei like this. If I hadn't looked carefully at her face, I might not even have recognized that this was the same confident and energetic swimming champion. The little bit of pity that had just risen in my heart disappeared in that very moment. I coldly ignored the joy shining in her eyes and turned to leave. When she saw that I was leaving, she panicked and immediately stood in front of me. "Lu Chen, I finally found you. Come back to the Qin family with me, please." Hearing her words, only a cold laugh rose in my heart. She truly believed that even after everything that had happened, I would quietly go back with her. Who had given her so much confidence? "Miss Qin, if I remember correctly, we are already divorced, and you yourself gave me the divorce papers. On top of that, the 5-year agreement also ended on the day of Yuan Yuan's funeral. I have completely repaid the Qin family's kindness. Now there is nothing left between us. So please leave from here." Qin Wuwei froze completely for a moment. "Do you regard these 5 years as nothing more than a relationship of repaying a favor?" Her eyes filled with shock and pain. It was as if she couldn't believe that such cold and heartless words could come from my mouth. But unfortunately, the Lu Chen who once loved her with all his heart and soul had died on the same day my son took his last breath, along with Yuan Yuan. If the relationship between us was not just about repaying a favor, then tell me what kind of wife treats her husband so cruelly, and what kind of mother pushes her own son into the mouth of death with her own hands. Tears began to fall from Qin Wuwei's eyes. "How can you be so heartless? Don't you remember when Yuan Yuan was born? You said we would stay together for life." Deep pain was clearly visible on her face, as if I were the one who had abandoned her. The anger inside me flared up again. She still had the courage to take Yuan Yuan's name. I said with a cold laugh. You yourself said it, didn't you? That was from the time when Yuan Yuan was born. But now tell me, where is Yuan Yuan? The moment she heard my question, she completely froze. Her lips began to tremble, but not a single word came out of her mouth. I didn't feel it necessary to stand with her even a moment longer. I took Senior Sister Wang's hand and walked straight away from there. The moment the wooden door slammed shut, the weight in my heart gradually lightened. For the next few days, Senior Sister Wang always stayed around me. I could see that she wanted to say something many times but stopped herself every time. In the end, I broke the silence myself. Senior Sister, don't worry about me. She is just a bad part of my past life. I'm not so foolish as to fall for her tricks a second time. Hearing my words, the tension on her face finally slowly eased. She clenched her fist in anger and looked outside, saying loudly, "Just pray that woman doesn't appear in front of me again. Otherwise the new medicines I've made, I'll test them on her first." Seeing her overacting, I couldn't hold back my laughter, and the heavy, gloomy feeling that had filled my heart after meeting Qin Wuwei also lightened to a great extent. I had thought that Qin Wuwei would finally give up. But after that, every day she stood outside the gate holding a large bouquet of red roses. Whether it was heavy rain or a storm, she never missed a single day. None of us paid any attention to her. But unfortunately, someone recognized her as the famous swimming champion. In just a short while, news spread on the internet that she was sincerely trying to win back her ex-husband. Many influencers and social media people arrived. Those people completely disturbed our peaceful life. Some idle people even tried to climb over the wall to come inside. Everyone just wanted me and Qin Wuwei to get back together. Then I realized that if I continued to ignore her, she would create an even bigger spectacle. I called her father and then calmly opened the gate and walked out. The moment she saw me, her eyes lit up with joy. She wanted to run toward me but held herself back and remained standing there. When I reached her, she knelt on one knee and held out the bouquet toward me. "Lu Chun, this is for you." Instead of taking the flowers, I covered my nose and took a step back. She said in surprise, "These are your favorite roses, aren't they?" I didn't give her any long explanation. I just said in a cold tone, "Not anymore." The truth was that since childhood I had been allergic to flower pollen. But the first gift Qin Wuwei had ever given me was roses. So every time my nose would get blocked. Even so, I always pretended to be happy in front of her. But now I no longer wanted to endure it. "Lu Chun, are you still angry with me?" It was my fault. At that time I really didn't know that Yuan Yuan's feet had been tied. I only wanted him to learn a lesson. He was my son too. How could I want to take my own son's life? Everything happened because of Zhu Xinian. He deceived me. I thought he was the one who had saved my life years ago. But in reality his target was only the Qin family's property. I thought you had betrayed me, so I treated you so badly. He deliberately created misunderstandings between you and me, and he was the one who set the trap that caused Yuan Yuan's death. I have handed him over to the police, and I have also aborted my child. Can't we start over again? Saying this, she took out a small box from behind her and opened its lid. When I heard that she had aborted her child and handed Zhu Xinian over to the police, I felt not the slightest relief. On the contrary, a chill ran through my entire body. I couldn't even imagine that she could go to such an extent. First she had ruined my life for Zhu Xinian, and after Yuan Yuan's death she began taking revenge on the same Zhu Xinian without any mercy. She put all the blame on his head, as if she herself were the real victim of this entire tragedy. I couldn't bear it anymore. I slapped her hard across the face. "Aren't you ashamed saying all this?" She was stunned by the slap, but my anger still hadn't ended. I scolded her. "If you hadn't always believed yourself to be right, how could you have so easily accepted that Zhu Xinian was your savior? If you hadn't blindly trusted his words, would you have forced Yuan Yuan to practice holding his breath underwater? And if you hadn't supported every single one of his words, how would Zhu Xinian have even gotten the chance to kill my son? I hate Zhu Xinian, but I hate you even more than him. The biggest reason that destroyed my and Yuan Yuan's happy life is you." With every word of mine, Qin Wuwei's upright body slowly bent lower and lower. In the end she completely broke. She sat down on the ground. Tears and mucus were flowing together on her face. This time I was looking down at her. Only then did I realize that the woman who once looked so beautiful and radiant had today become nothing more than a pitiful and broken human being. She said while crying, "It was all my fault. Lu Chun, tell me, what should I do so that you forgive me?" She fell at my feet, crying loudly. She tightly grabbed my pant with both hands. In her eyes there was only one thing begging. But I felt not the slightest pity for her. I coldly pushed her away with my foot. Then I said, "Only on one condition. If you can bring Yuan Yuan back alive, then maybe everything can be fine. Otherwise, In this life I never want to see your face again. The moment she heard these words, deep despair spread across Qin Wui's face. She knew very well that this was a wish that could never be fulfilled. At that very moment Qin Wui's father arrived. He looked at me with eyes full of deep shame and regret. But he didn't say a single word. He just gritted his teeth, forcefully pulled Qin Wei, and took her away from there. And with that, everything ended. The people present also let out deep sighs and expressed regret. They had thought she was a loyal woman who would do anything for her love. But the truth turned out to be that she hadn't even hesitated to take her own son's life for her lover. A woman who could do such a thing to the child born from her own womb was truly not even worthy of being called a human. People on social media began to troll her badly. A wave of anger against her spread everywhere. When the Swimming Association learned of her crimes, they immediately issued an official statement. She was publicly condemned, and all her competition licenses and participation rights were permanently cancelled. There was a time when Qin Wei was at the peak of fame, but in the blink of an eye she lost everything. All her wealth was gone. In the end she had to live with her father in a small, broken-down rented room. The daily habit of drinking revived her old injury. Her condition became so bad that she even walked with a limp. Senior Sister Wang had told me all these things after reading them on the internet. After listening to everything, I only said, "This is the fruit of her karma." After that I once again lost myself in the world of medical books. Many years later, one day when I was going as a doctor to see patients and stopped by Yuan's grave on the way, my eyes fell on an unnamed grave built right next to it.